All right, Chris, here's the question of the day. Here's what we got.
All right.
We're starting to get our Penn State schedule out, times, networks, that type of thing. And the discussion every summer, every year for Penn State football is this. Which game is going to be the whiteout?
Right.
And these last couple of years, it just seems to always come down to this. Do we make it a night game against a lesser team prior to November? Or do we make it a late season game against an opponent like Ohio State for a Fox noon game? What say you?
Well, yeah, so that's pretty much the choice we've been forced into since the new media deal, because Big Noon on Fox has become such a moneymaker for that network. They want to put all their top matchups on there. I was thinking about this a little bit, Jim, when we got this topic for this week. One of my issues with always making the quote unquote biggest game the whiteout was it just basically became, okay, as a default, every single year, the whiteout is going to be the Ohio State game or the Michigan game. And so, again, my feeling was that was getting kind of played out and boring. I understand people view the whiteout as a weapon and you want to keep that arrow in your quiver and save it for your toughest opponent. But I, for myself, don't have this visceral attachment to we must have the whiteout against Ohio State or Michigan every single year. It has to be the best opponent. And especially now introducing this Big Noon variable into it, I believe that the experience and the aesthetic and the energy of the whiteout is uniquely tied to the night game experience. And so if I'm choosing between it must be the Ohio State or the Michigan or whatever, the big game every single year, which we know most years is going to get stuck in that noon kickoff slot. So we're doing the whiteout under the light of day, or we're moving it around. We're maybe not always tying it to the marquee opponent, but we're ensuring we keep that night game atmosphere. I'd rather keep it at night. There's just nothing like the visual of the 107,000 clad in white under the lights. I think that's too important to not keep it, preserve it.
Well, I have a couple of reactions to it, Chris. First of all, I'm with you. I think the whole visual of the whiteout, it's designed for a night game. And if we look back, even for games that you might not have thought of as the huge game, the Minnesota game comes to mind at night.
Sure.
What a great visual, what a great experience. And the fans were into it like crazy in a way they would not be if it were not a whiteout game. My second thought on this is, and you and I talked about this a little bit and I know a little bit different take on it, is the schedule makers are so good to Michigan and Ohio State. That has to be played the last week of the year, played at noon. Yes, I know it coincides with Fox with their big noon game. But even when it was ESPN and the big games are at night, no. The league just always scheduled it the last game. They always schedule it at noon. Why? Because it's Michigan and Ohio State. At what point does someone in the league say, hey, wait a minute, this whiteout thing, it sort of has caught on here a bit, Chris. It's a big deal. We should, as a conference, make sure it's set up that way for one of our biggest games. So instead of scheduling Ohio State or Michigan, that one home game between the two of them in November, where those teams have an out, where they could say, we're not going to play at night in November. How about the schedule makers in the Big Ten office say, you know what? Biggest game of the year at Penn State has to be scheduled in October, or if it's in November, it has to be a night game because we have this tremendous event called the Whiteout, which is great for our brand. So we're going to make it happen, just like we make Michigan, Ohio State happen the last week of the season. How about that, Chris?
Well, you're not going to like my answer, Jim, but the reality is that Penn State had its opportunity to muscle its way into the conversation with Michigan and Ohio State as the two programs that run the conference over the last few years. We just didn't take advantage of it. So, if you believe it's a meritocracy to some extent, where if you want to make it a 3-team league instead of a 2-team league, you got to prove that, on the bottom line with the dollars and the viewership and on the field. And in both cases, Penn State just falls a little bit short. So don't expect to get the royal red carpet treatment in the same way that Michigan and Ohio State have. Now, that being said, Penn State's still one of the most valuable brands in the conference, and you do want to keep all your network partners happy. So being able to feature the whiteout on an NBC primetime telecast is not small potatoes. Going back to my idea of why I would rather preserve the night game atmosphere than play a noon game against Ohio State and make it the whiteout. There's the aesthetics, there's the energy, there's the experience. I am also, frankly, a little bit sick and tired of Penn State always losing in that game. I'm not somebody who is not too proud to pad our stats in that game a little bit. I also do think about the fact that I think fans ought to be able to get the whiteout experience. And so, I don't like the idea that it's going to be the most expensive ticket every single time. So there are a bunch of reasons you can factor in and say, it's okay. It's okay to not have it be the Ohio State or the Michigan game every year. But I think the other point is that Fox is always going to look for the most valuable TV properties and put them in at big noon. Right. So Michigan, Ohio State is right at the top of the pile on that in terms of the most watched games every year, but not too far down the list. Maybe even number 2 is Penn State, Ohio State. But the good thing about conference expansion, Jim, is that I think it has created the opportunity for there to be other marquee games in a single year schedule often. So even if Penn State is hosting Ohio State, as they are this year, and I'm not saying that's not going to be the whiteout. I think it may be, even despite its early November kickoff time. I think you're going to see other big games on the schedule that you can justifiably say this is both an opponent deserving of the whiteout and an opportunity to get this thing into prime time. Because, Fox can only pick so many of those games. Like I said, there are other broadcast partners. So to me, I love the night game atmosphere of the whiteout. I am not averse to moving it around so other fan bases and other fans can get the experience. I like showcasing it in the primetime time slot on TV. I don't want to see these noon whiteouts. I just don't want to do it.
I'm with you. I think it belongs at night. And you do make a good point about some of the other opponents. You start hosting USC,
sure,
Oregon, Washington, those would be wonderful whiteout opportunities. Also, you know what, Chris? It does not matter when you play Ohio State, noon or not. The crowd atmosphere will be the way it's supposed to be. It will
right, and like I've said, we've already seen many times over that the whiteout does not make the difference between winning and losing against Ohio State for Penn State.
That is true. That is the case. I will still, though, hold out for the idea that the Big Ten should be acquiescing. They should be, as schedule makers, saying we should make it so that the whiteout game is a night game. That's what should be.
Win more games and draw more viewers, and the world will be your oyster.
All right. That's the last word, Chris. Thank you all for listening. This has been For the Bloggy on Keystone Sports Network.